There we go.
Are we ready?
Almost. Yeah, we're good, we're good.
Okay. Well, I guess before we even open up the meeting, we should explain.
Yes, okay. For everybody that's may be new here today, or it's been a while since you've been here, I think you'll notice that we now have some new carpet in here. We've been upgrading our audio systems also, and our goal is to get rid of that big cabinet there, and it will be reduced to about half the size of that. They just didn't get to finish that before the meeting. And so you can see that our audio projection assistance is not available to us, our microphones. And so we will be trying to project as best we can without those.
That's the point, is to project. All right, let's call the meeting to order. Please rise and place the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Read what you call the roll, please.
Commissioner Lyons.
Here.
Vice Mayor Stanley.
Here.
Commissioner White. Here. Commissioner Orthwine. Mayor Morgan.
Here.
Also present are Town Manager Dunham, Assistant Town Attorney Nazaro, Police Chief Allen, and myself.
Very good, thank you. We've been presented with the minutes from our November 12th meeting. Are there any comments, changes, suggestions? If not, let me make a motion to approve.
Motion to approve the minutes, from the meeting of November 12th, 2021.
Ms. Taylor?
Commissioner Lyons.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Stanley.
Yes.
Commissioner White. Commissioner Orthwine. Mayor Morgan.
Yes. I believe we have one addition to the agenda today.
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to add to, under the manager's report, a discussion of the Florida opioid settlement agreement funds.
Very good, thank you. All right, our next meeting will be January 14th at 9 a.m. for anyone who wishes to attend. Public comment. Anyone wish to speak? Yes, Ms. Pratt.
Good morning, I'm Copy Craft. I'm embarrassed to say I didn't listen to the November minutes, and I haven't been to a meeting since last spring. But when I was last here, they were talking about taking the polls down this summer. It's now December, and I was just wondering if that's been an agenda item, or if you could give us.
It's an agenda item every month, and so it will be, again.
Yes. Well, anyone else wish to speak? Mr. Borman?
Will there be an opportunity to speak at the time of the specific proposal?
Yes. Anyone else wish to comment? Thank you very much. All right, let's move on to the hearing on this application, the Davis property, 588 Banyan Road. First, any ex parte communications by commission? Not very good. Who's going to speak on behalf of the applicant? Please rise and be sworn.
You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you.
Good morning, my name is Benjamin Schreier from Infinity Architects, and we're working with the Davises on the design for the number 588 Banyan Road. There's an existing house on the property that we're requesting permission to demolish. But there is a gate out front, there's a site wall out front that we're proposing keeping and repair. Let's see, I get this centered on the screen. Okay. The house is all as of right except for one measure, which is the, I believe it's called a special exception on the western portion where we're allowed to have a one-story portion It's all the way on the west. The allowable square footage for the property is 8,720 square feet, and we're proposing 8,699. The second floor area is allowed to be 3,031 square feet, and we're below that by over 400 square feet at 2,625 square feet. The lot coverage allowed is 25%, and we're below 20% at 19.8%. The landscape area that is required is 40%, and at 82% is being provided. The building height is allowed to go up as high as 35 feet, and to the peak of the roof, we are at 28 feet 10 inches, a full 5 feet 60 and change below that, as well as the chimney is at 30 feet, which is also below the allowed. The finished floor of the house will be at 7.5 feet NAVD, which is what the current FEMA map requires. And the parking situation is the town requires that there be 2 indoor parking and 2 possible on the driveway. And we have 3 indoor and 2 on the driveway. And is there? It's not there. I apologize, I'm not sure what's going on, that we're getting half images here today. Is it pre-justice?
Let me try that. PDFs don't work really well on for presentation. The wheel, just the very thing. Yep, it's gonna have to be the clicker, I guess.
Okay. The house takes advantage of the views to the water. So that when one, let me go back. Here, when one enters the front door, which is, let me go over and show you. One enters over here and comes. These are directly towards the water. And major rooms of the house as well take advantage of views to the water, which happens to be on 3 sides of the property. Second floor of the house. The plan of the house. The styles within the allowable for the district within Gulfstream that it is, where it's broken up, where we have these Flemish gables on the house. The water, staff had asked a question regarding the amount, the percentage of glass on the rear, and we were well below the allowable amount on this elevation. And then we have some renderings of the house on the left here. It says viewed from looking through the existing gates, it's going to be renovated towards the front door, view straight out the front door on the right. And then looking from the water side towards the central portion of the house on the left. And on the right, that little 1-story portion right here is the little piece that is that little special exception that was discussed. That's something that had been vetted very carefully by staff and the town attorney. And when it was reviewed architecturally, that was something that was carefully looked at, and it does meet the criteria.
Why does it meet the criteria?
I might ask staff if we help understand. There was a setback that was determined that it's allowed
I think it's 50 feet.
of 24 feet from the property line there, and it's within that 24 feet.
I'm sorry, it's a 50-foot setback.
Correct.
Why do you qualify for a special exception to reduce that?
I'm going to defer to staff and to the town attorney on that, because they're the ones who helped us determine this, if I may. And this is something that has been carefully looked at for months.
And you have to present us with reasons why you should be able to expand your house beyond the setback. And
Look, initially it was presented to us that we're the setback.
other than to expand the size of the house, I'm not sure why you would be granted a special.
It is something that exists to neighboring properties as well, that have the unique situation of having the water on the 3 sides. The water on 3 sides, I believe, is what created it. That the lot would have been just a sliver down the middle that could have been built, rather than by doing the 50 feet on both sides.
Well, only if you have a really big house. I just looked at the photograph of the proposed residence, and it takes up a good chunk of the property. And frankly, in my opinion, there's an overwhelming massness to this house. Not just the main front mass, but the additional piece of the property. I think it's what you're talking about, where the special exception is being requested for this extension of the home. That extension looks large, or perhaps I'm mistaken, but it sure looks like a
Sure, let me show you.
piece of
On the
building.
left-hand
This is
portion
the
here,
special exception.
this is a little piece, that's the special exception.
Okay.
Not, yeah, just this little piece.
Is that a two-story section?
This is two-story, the special exceptions are one-story piece.
Over the garage, right?
This is over the, this is
Right.
partially over the, this is actually over a family room. The garage is behind. This is there's a bedroom that's up here, and the two-story section. And the special exception part is just this little one-story piece right here.
Okay, but I still don't see how it qualifies for that extension into the setback. Look what the basis is. I mean, your statement is we want it, so therefore we can use it. Well, then everybody, there would be no purpose to having a setback on the water.
And then there's neighboring properties which have this as well, that are uniquely positioned in terms of being these peninsula type properties. And so that it's something that is actually consistent with the neighborhood rather than being not consistent with the neighborhood.
Weren't special exceptions started for existing homes?
I know we've gone through this before, but you can still have them on the line. Right, the new license?
Sure. So with all of our special exception criteria, they're not necessarily for new homes or existing construction. There are specific criteria within typically each special exception that an applicant would need to meet to qualify for that special exception. So the special exception, and I think there's maybe some confusion, the special exception at play here is for the rear setback, which is the south side, not the west side. The west side setback, the first story to second story offset is part of the requirement in our code, which prevents you from essentially having a straight wall right on the setback. There needs to be a like a wedding cake sort of stair step. The special exception issue, like I said, is the south side. They're requesting a reduction from 50 feet to 35 feet, and that's covered in section 7075J, rear setbacks for waterfront lots in the core district. So to meet this, to qualify for this special exception, first it has to be the rear setback, it has to be a waterfront lot, and it has to be in the core district. So there are specific standards for review, which if you just humor me, I'll read, that the applicant needs to meet to be approved. The first one is the reduced setback will not substantially alter the character of the waterfront in the immediate vicinity, including any other properties facing into the same cove or stretch of waterway. The second one is the reduction of the rear setback is necessary to ensure adequate buildable area. The third one is the reduced setback allows for a more attractive architectural design and more practical home layout. And the fourth one is any portion of the structure within 50 feet of the waterway or bulkhead shall not exceed 1 story with a maximum height of 20 feet. And then it has some exceptions. So that's why the portion of the structure on the south side is only a single story, because that's part of the criteria.
Can we go to the elevation? I think it's a little confusing.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think I know what it's the back side of the house. Is it not?
Talking about facing the pool,
Right.
Yes, exactly.
right? And then on the front side, you've got, the existing tree there, which we haven't gotten into the landscape plan and a circular drive. It's not a through street, obviously, most point lots aren't, so it's sort of.
Can you go up a little bit?
Unfortunately, so this is the portion, this is the south side, this is the one-story portion that's here, the special exception. The special exception that's been, I guess, requested is regarding over here.
That's the one-story master bedroom wing,
Correct.
right? And that's the rear part of it facing south. It's kind of hard to orientate because a lot of the house is on an angle.
Right.
Facing the base. Okay, I got you.
And then regarding the elevation of that, this is the elevation of that portion right here. It's the portion here, it's skewed on a 45-degree angle there. Let's see, there it is skewed on the other, when looking from the east, this is the portion right there. And in this elevation right here is where you see it.
Right.
So the portion of the house that is on the one-story portion of the house.
Can you just scroll to the bottom one there?
Right.
I think that's
I think
helpful
that's
for that
better.
one up high. Yeah. So
These guys,
Yeah.
and there you go, and there it is again.
so it's coming back just a little bit past the corner of the pool there. What is that? That's 15 feet, which is what's in the application, right?
Correct.
It's actually,
30, so
it's actually 30 feet back
from the seawall.
from the property line,
Property.
which is nominally the seawall.
And the minimum is 25, right?
In the rear.
It's 50 to 35.
No, it's 50.
Yeah, it's
50 to
50.
The setback
35.
is 50,
15 is going to 35.
and it's going to the 15-foot setback, right?
Pardon me, it's 35 feet back from the property, not
Right.
30 feet. I forgot, there's a 5-foot utility.
That's right.
These are
Correct.
But I guess the point is it necessary? As council was reading the requirements for a special exception, outside of the desire to move the home further south, to expand the size of the building. The definition of the special exception was it was necessary. It was necessary for the construction of the home. It was appropriate for the construction of the home. And I believe there was also a comment that it has to fit within the character of the other homes, the neighborhood, the district that resides in, correct?
Correct.
And how does it meet those?
It meets it by, it is, the square footage that we're asking for is no more than what the town allows. We're not asking for this exception being additional square footage. The style of the architecture is within the character of the neighborhood. The way that the massing has been broken down, so there's a village-like character to it rather than one big block.
Really? You think this meets the characteristic of a small village, which is the definition of the core district's character?
It's broken into.
Let's look at your elevation here. And it was the section that you were referring to. You've got a mass in the middle. I understand you have that because you've got a 2-story home with a lot of rooms in it. But then you've got this one on the side that you were pointing to. That's another 2-story element, creating a significant massing effect in a core district that is defined rather differently. Check that out. The Austrian core district is characterized by 1-story and a few partial 2-story homes, which fit comfortably on the lots. Together, the homes, with their landscape features and narrow streets, lend an elegant yet understated village feel to the district. And I guess my point is that we're seeing this more and more as people are building new homes. They're going bigger and bigger. And in my opinion is this is not a village feel. This is a very large house that's seeking even additional setback variation to put a large home on a lot that is going to be visible to every other home in that code. This house is unique. The lot is unique because it's not just right next to another house on a street. It's in front of all the other homes around that code. That's my main concern.
It is primarily, it is a house that is, as with the kind of it has partial parts that are 2 stories. We have partial part that's 2 stories. The part that faces the code to the To the east is a one-story wing, which is the part that has this part that's has the special exception that's being requested. So it's done in a way that's being sensitive to that need. And the two-story portion is primarily the central portion of the house. And then sort of in the characteristic of the core district, there's a romantic little guest cottage on top of the garage. Now the massing is to the northwestern portion of the property. And for those reasons, that's why we felt that it was definitely in the character of it. There's the similar lots that are the peninsula lots are also nearly all of them, I believe all of them also have followed these setbacks as well. So, or might have done these special exceptions as well. So it's not unique. It's almost like something that is unique that happened because while the setbacks are written for the more generic lot, not the peninsula lot, there's something to take advantage of or something that can be an opportunity for it in terms of this type of property. It has the unique situation with being water on three sides. We believe that, when going from the cove side, it's the one-story mass, so that the houses that are across the cove, which are looking at this and not directly at the intercoastal, are seeing the one-story portion. And then as one is on the other side or traversing up and down the intercoastal waterway, that there is a central part that has a two-story mass. And then there's this little guest house on top of the family room area on the northwest corner as well.
Do you agree this home is going to be a defining feature to anyone on Polo or anywhere else on the cove looking out across the water?
We recognize that it's a very nice home, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Do I have the neighbors calling or? I know notices were sent
No,
out.
we've had no
No,
contact.
Are there any houses this size?
So what's the house across from you? Point, five, that's 501.
No, that's not number one. It's directly across the, yeah.
so across the cove,
That's our
yeah.
job.
Yeah, the applicant. Here's a little bit different because that's not, the water's only on two sides instead of three. Similar style, but it's mainly an L shape. So you've got the house here, and then the two-story, still Cape Dutch on the fenestrations, but you've got the two-story guest house, the same face of the water. But you don't have the water here looking across from the basin. It's a multiple point. So I think that one of the mayor's problems, of course, the mayor can speak for himself, is so we're stuck on the special exception, but also, I guess, the east elevation. So all the other houses that are looking across the basin, and you've orientated it very similar to what you would do as an architect. You want the southwest exposure to the pool. You don't want to flip the house. You already have the existing tree and the estate-like feel coming into it, which the existing house has to some degree. So I think we're back to, is that kind of where you are other than the 15 feet? Is you've got the one-story wing on the side of the house, but that's really what you're looking at unless you're going on through street and driving up to the front. More or
I
less.
think I said, it's both the setback and the massing of this particularly large home that is visible to all other homes in the cove. I have a problem with it. I don't think it's consistent with the district definition in our code, which requires us to consider these characteristics. It mandates that we consider them. And I think we need to consider them.
The first Scott's house on the other side of that it was just a renovation.
Yeah.
It wasn't a total.
No, that was existing.
It wasn't
construction.
new construction,
Right,
it was a
correct.
renovation.
Correct.
And so it was very similar to what was there. And it does have water on three sides, I think, but it's not the same lot. It's not as deep.
There's another lot, two things. First of all, in terms of mass of this, we are a full 6 feet below the allowable overall height that's allowed for the house. Because I know we've been very sensitive in terms of what might appear as mass. to be 6 feet lower than the allowable, very large. Going down there, well, I apologize that we don't have the photograph of the aerial photograph. There's another peninsula lot that's nearly identical that follows the same setbacks and exception that's being requested here today, and it's very similar in scale to this house. So that it's not, it's unprecedented in terms of what Gulfstream has approved previously.
Do you have any comments from the public? Board.
I'm going to semi-brief and do them quickly. Good morning, my name is Bill Boardman. My wife Nancy and I are 17-year residents of Gulfstream on Polo Drive. I should say on the other side of Polo Drive, not the side affected by this house. I'm past president of the Civic Association of the Gulfstream Golf Club. And in 2014, I accepted the commission's request to chair an ad hoc committee to review and rewrite where necessary the zoning code and design manual. While I'm still on the Civic Association board, I speak today as an individual and not on behalf of that organization. I have reviewed the application and have several concerns. The house, the outbuildings are large, massive, and should be in any way considered a mansion. And it would in most cases. The current house on the lot is a one-floor small home that is barely visible from the east of the coast. The roof really in no places is higher than the surrounding trees. You can barely see the house. The lot is the principal point of view from over 10 to 15 houses on the east side and somewhat on the north and south side of the coast. These homes are some of the most expensive houses in Gulfstream. And huge investments have been made by our friends and neighbors in this view. I should quickly add, as I said, we do not live on that side. The bottom line is that the lot in question is probably the most important in the core area. And we, to use a term, we've got to get it right. And there are other reasons why we need to get it right. And that is just what the architect has done. He refers to another house as justification for what he wants to do. We've got to approach this on the assumption that that house on that lot cited time and time again the massing that it allowed in the core area. The zoning code and the design manual give the ARPD and the commission great latitude in reviewing applications. There are numbers to be checked, but these ordinances also give jurisdiction over the size, mass, and most importantly, picking up on the mayor's comments, the neighborhood homes that exist in the current neighborhood. If one compares this proposed house to the neighborhood and analyzes the mass of the house and impact on the views of the community, it is clear that there is more work to be done on the more subjective requirements. I would therefore ask the commission to err on the side of a significant number of residents and return the application to the ARPD for an in-depth review to assure that we advance the founding principles of Gulfstream as expressed in the zoning code and the design manual. I really believe this. We are at a critical time in the development of our town. And to approve this application in its present form will have the effect of writing out of our zoning code the semi-subjective safeguards that our predecessor wrote in. And in closing, I would like to read to you in the Article 1 of our design manual, there's a historic summary of what's happened and what they're trying to create. Prior to adoption of this chapter, the established residential patterns were being threatened by a phenomenon known as mansionization, which is affecting older communities with rapidly escalating property values. Mansionization is characterized by existing structures being demolished to make room for larger, more elaborate houses, and has the potential to destroy the unique character and scale of the town. The desire to maintain the unique residential character of the town led to the adoption of this chapter. But I have a request. I never really saw the elevation from the east side of Polo Coast. That would be the western elevation. I have looked at it before, but I haven't seen
This is the eastern portion of the base of the cove, this one-story portion here.
Yeah, it's not the whole thing. You gotta see the whole thing.
And I guess that perspective is going to be what's going to help the most here today.
Yeah, that doesn't show me.
Unfortunately, this is from the east, and unfortunately, because we can't get this to flow correctly, you're seeing it from the ground there with the two-story.
It's not ground level, but
Yeah,
but yeah, from ground level up high.
I mean, we were trying to be very sensitive in terms of presenting a very low front towards the cove.
Well, but it's not. That east side looks straight into the mass of the center part of the house. Goes straight over the single family, or excuse me, the single story.
Yes. And that two-story part is more than 55 feet away from the setback.
Oh, and I know it's not the setback issue. It's who's looking at the house from the code. This is the neighborhood district, the neighborhood field, the village field, if you will. That's what they're going to be. And I'm sorry if I haven't been as articulate as I should be, but that's what's affecting the character of our core neighborhood district. I think this house is not in keeping with that character because of its size, its massive, and its placement, its particular location makes it especially visible.
What's the square footage of the master wing again? I know it's in here, but you probably know it offhand again, just for the record.
Isolated of the master unit.
Yeah.
No.
I can calculate it. I should be able to figure it
The whole piece on this end is the master suite.
Sure, I can get you.
Yeah.
Can I ask a
It
question?
includes an exercise room. Huh?
And a gym.
And a gym, yeah.
And a bedroom.
It's about 1,600. From a quick calculation, it's 1,600 square feet.
Mayor, may I ask a question? Did you get to know this? Just the adjoining property line?
Yeah, you have let's see, adjoining.
It went, when they send off for the labels, it goes to the property appraiser's office. They lay out on their map, however many feet away that you're asking for. And this one went all around the whole code,
Did?
yes.
Mrs. Orthwine, you got one.
200, was it 200 foot radius?
Yeah, we're going to everybody in the code.
Yes,
Because of the location.
Right.
yes.
I think what Scott's saying is the placement of the house on the piece of property. And we created this, by the way, because we sold off that piece to Mr. Davis, that little parcel, which enabled him to build an 8,699. So we created some of this. But I think what Mr. Morgan's saying is all the homes on Polo Cove are pretty much, I mean, you've angled this, so it's not going to be that attractive to the people right across the water from there. I think that's what you're saying. And that it's a pretty massive structure for the cove itself. It's a beautiful house. But I think that's what you're saying. I don't know.
Well, the house is positioned, proposed new home is positioned similarly to the way it's positioned now. Willie, I think.
In a different way, though.
It's in my view, based on what I've heard, and, I've read the design manual many times. And I think the mayor was trying to highlight the context in which you look at the statistics. The statistics say you can have so many square feet, but that's just a guideline. It has to still fit into the context of the design manual. And the core district is very unique in terms of its characteristics. And as Mr. Boardman cited, the reason the design manual was drafted was because of its concern of these mansions being built, as perceived back in that day. And so I think it's really, at the end of the day, I don't know whether it's massing is scale, size. I think, they're all sort of interchangeable in my mind. It's too big, I think what you're saying.
Yes.
And again, in the context of the core district, if it was on oceanfront, that would be a different context. Core district, they're understated, small. And I'm just a statement of fact. I'm not.
And what's curious to me is, when mass is something, size is something that's being addressed here, is that we are well below the overall height that's allowed. One-story portions are the ones that are adjacent to the neighbors. The style of architecture is a style that is preferred by town and preferred by the client as well. And we're very, pleased with the style of architecture. The lot coverage is significantly below what is allowed by more than lot coverage is, yes, it's significantly below what is allowed. So that, I hear the concerns, but I really believe that on behalf of the client, that we attempted to address those in terms of, and be sensitive to the community as well, and that the design would be something that would be appropriately fitting for Gulf Stream district.
I Are there other homes of this size? I mean, they're not on the code itself, or in the core area.
But the house that's across the waterway, on that point, that's,
You have any sense of it?
I think it's 6,600 square feet. The, is it Mrs. Stouter?
Yeah.
Hers is,
There are larger lots in town that also use the maximum square footage that puts them
Yeah.
in the same sort of
You got one on
ballpark.
the basin, that's about 10,000.
You have 554 Palm Way at the end of the Palm Way. Once you hit the cul-de-sac going south, it's a very large lot there. You have Miss Souders at 555 Banyan, also a very large lot. They don't line the
the main road of Van.
right. These are sort of external that you can't really see from the code.
Placement of the lots that is so important.
As the vice mayor said, there's one that is on Polo, that is on the code, that's very large.
There one on this.
What size is the Clark's house? Well, that's across the street from you.
Right.
What?
The Clark's house, do we have any, remember how big that is?
Yeah, it's 10.
No.
I went through, it's close to 10.
10,000.
Again, I don't know if that's
Ours is
covered loader.
10,000.
I don't know if that's including or excluding covered loadership, but the footprint's roughly 10.
But it's not an invisible spot.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. It's not a point.
And it's spread out.
But I think that's the point Mr. Boardman made. Because one has been done in the past, is that we shouldn't evaluate this and try to adhere to the directive of the design manual. It's been written for the sole purpose of preserving the character of the neighborhood. I mean, you see what happens at Delray. You've seen Ocean Ridge. You've seen our neighboring towns, what's happened to them. Palm Beach is wrestling with this as well. So I have Manalapan's a perfect example. I think it's already gone. There's no going back to it. So this is an opportunity to refocus the town on that which is important, preserving its overall character, which means preserving its neighborhood characteristics.
I have a question. So other than the square footage of the home, which that point's been made. So you've got basically 4 sides to this house that are all visible. 3 sides are visible, 3.5 sides are visible from neighboring residents, either from the streetscape or from the basin, which we've all take that. I mean, one of the issues with the orientation of the house, and I'm not an architect, is so if you're looking for basically, other than the massing and the square footage, 3 fronts, you're going to draw, if the master wing in whatever form is still on the quiet side of the house, which is the basin versus the intercoastal, which is one of the reasons why it's there. If you're looking, instead of just having a 1-story elevation with no architectural detail, I get the special exception and all that stuff, but I mean, you're talking about orientation of the house. I mean, you're looking for like another front and another fenestration to make the east elevation look more inviting for whatever's there. That also draws, 2 things. 1, you get another front, but 2, you also draw more attention to that elevation as well. Unless, again, we're looking for a total redesign. I don't know where we're at on that. So, I mean, there is something to be said that it's supposed to look inviting from 3 sides. Not that it doesn't now, and I know what you're trying to do. It's low rise, quiet, put the landscaping up. You're not even supposed to see that much, but I mean, if you put a fenestration in or re-juxtapose it with the setback, you're going to be looking at oh, there's 3rd side of the house. There's something to be said that, yeah, that's what you want, and something to be said that's what you don't want. Again, I get this special exception, and I get the overall square footage, but we're just talking about the elevations at the end of the day. We've had new construction here where, friends and neighbors are in a panic over FEMA. The streets are low, new houses like here, and I'm like, well, kind of where it needs to be. Everyone's kind of shocked. I mean, I don't think we have that issue here, but, you know, everybody has a different, you know, looks at it in a different way.
But we do have it. We're gonna talk about it later.
Yeah, yeah, but, so that would be my other point. I mean, you've got basically, the house that's visible on all four sides, so to speak. But again, it's viewed by the most residents on that elevation, other than the back, that's cool on the east elevation.
I would like to point out that the house, even with the special exception, the house is farther away from the setback than the house that's on the south side of the code. It's directly facing across the way. There's a 2-story portion there. And then we've been talking about the architecture, and what's seen in its totality includes the landscape. And if that's something that the council may want to see relative to it, because it's really the whole composition altogether, that might be something that contributes to it.
Well, we're not gonna be in a position to
Correct.
redesign it here.
Correct.
But your point is a good one.
That
It certainly should be landscaping on that east side, but there's very little.
The renderings don't depict what is
Okay.
in the landscape.
Yeah, I think I see it, but that's certainly one consideration, but I think the home needs to be made smaller. That's just, I'm sorry. That's my take on it.
It doesn't show that much landscaping on the landscaping plan, and on the east, the bedroom side, which I assume they want water views there too from the inside. I mean, there's some bushes, but palm trees really don't mask the.
On the landscape architecture here, there's sea grapes. In addition to that as well, green island ficus.
Hi, my name is Joe Peterson. I'm the landscape architect.
Good morning.
And on the east side,
Sure.
this is a large into the landscape plan. And over there, yes, we have a number of existing coconut palms that are in the corner there. There's 5 more that are out here along on the south side. I'm sorry.
No, that's good. This is.
Okay. And we're going to relocate over there, and we're putting in 4 sea grape trees, a number of ligustrums up here around the front of the house, and date palms as well, and then adequate screening for all the mechanical equipment as well. Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
I guess my point is, since it's, there's a water lot from 3 sides.
I'm sorry.
It's a water lot from 3 sides of the house. If it were a landlocked area, then there's, you know, the ficus or or things like that, that can really mask them. But the people inside, if they have 3 sides of water, they want to have the water view, so you really can't do as much masking with the masking.
Right, the side to the southwest, we have a dozen or so coconut palm granted the curved trunks, and we're putting bougainvilleas up on the trunks, but that's preserved that view out to the southwest. On the west, we're adding more sea grape trees. There's an existing large one there now that we're keeping, big multi-trunk one, and there's a big mahogany tree there as well that we're keeping. So we're screening both the east and the west pretty good.
So, Mayor, what I'm reflecting on, as the architect suggested, that we have to look at it in its comprehensive, complete state, i.e. the landscaping. Because often we've been challenged by looking at just the building. It looks massive. But is there a way that, in terms of form and or landscaping that the homeowner could comply with the intent of the design manual and still enjoy similar square footage. Because we're sort of at this dilemma here where looking at just the statistics in an isolated sense, says you can, it suggests as a guideline, you could build it to a certain size. And is a way that we as a town could accomplish our desire to avoid what would look like a massive house by shape and or landscaping. I don't know. I'm not sure that how we solve the problem. At some point, the architect's got to leave here with some sense of, are you asking to reduce the square footage? Is that, I mean, I think that's
why there was a period of quiet before you spoke up. Because that is,
yeah, I know, I'm trying.
that is the difficulty. We voiced our concerns and, you know, what next? I don't see how this landscaping changes the concern over the mass of this large home in the context of the core. So I would think it needs to be reduced.
This has been presented before the review board, which unanimously approved it. None of these issues were brought up. I believe they make recommendations to this council. And so that coming today, this was completely unanticipated. I mean, because the board, the village, that the town is empowered with that, you know, make compliments and stuff. So just want to point it out. Just a professional, you know, it leaves me in a quandary in terms of like, what's going on here.
I'm sympathetic to your position. Because I'm aware of the ARPB's position. We all are. We've all served on the ARPB and well aware of its responsibilities and its advisory capacity. But it's the commission's responsibility to make the final judgment.
So the total allowable floor area is 8720 square feet, and you're using 8699. Is that what I'm reading? So that's not considerably less, but it's less.
Well, I think we need to, unless there are other comments.
You know, I think it's a lovely house. I really do. I think probably what's taking a little beating here is the position of it more than anything. You know, I live across from it. Right now you see a house there, you see a lot of landscaping. And it's a one-story house, so.
There's a two-story portion of the house.
Yeah, but it faces the intercoastal.
Just,
Yeah,
it's a
it's
two-story
like this
portion.
big, yeah, I agree. Did you ever consider a one-story house, or you can't put the square footage on that?
We wanted to take advantage of the views.
Students, yeah. I'm not sure.
Right, so on the direction, I mean, for the applicant, I mean, what are we looking at? The special exception, not pleased with that, which increases the size.
I
of
don't
the
see a
special-
basis for a special exception.
Okay, so there's one,
But that's my opinion. I
right?
don't know what your opinion is.
That's, well, I'm just giving you the feedback in a concise way if this is going to ultimately be sent back to the
You can,
table and sent back to the ARPB, or, you know,
You can-
what do you want to do on the board chart here?
you can direct it to return to the ARPB with specific direction for them to look at particular items, for the applicant to address those. You can give the applicant direction and return it here. It's really up to you as far as procedurally how that goes, because you're permitted to do either of those under the code.
The only thing is, I don't see a need for a 15-foot special exception. That's the only thing that was really put into our design manual. I've been around a long time. It was put into our design manual for existing homes. Whether the newer homes are getting it, it's a different situation. But it really was the intention of that for existing homes. So that's the only comment. And also, we created this by selling off a piece of property.
Well, there's a benefit to the applicant to not denying the application, but rather
Correct.
sending it back, correct? Which I think in fairness should be done. And I think the ARPB, which has the opportunity to review these minutes and evaluate this at their meeting before it returns to us, would be helpful. As far as guidance is concerned, the special exception seem to reject that. And in my opinion, the home is too big. It's just too big for its placement. So it needs to be made smaller, in my opinion.
We all, I think, we like the design. Just so we.
I think this nice.
Yeah, the elevation is.
I think, you know, I think the house is nice. I mean,
By the way, one thing that will be coming up, so we might will just review today, in the window frames and the color along with that was one of the concern expressed by the ALPD regarding the window frames and the garage doors. You have samples of that, so you don't have to run through this.
The garage doors are gonna be going to white instead of blue color. And this is the sample, where it's the glossy finish, and when it gets done, the matte finish, which we're awaiting, and possibly toning it down a little bit. We're gonna be revisiting that.
So if you could show the elevation, which would be the back of the house, which is sort of southwest. There are a lot of windows and doors. And one of my concerns is with that blue, if everybody could see the blue, that's going to be the window frame. That's going to really, I think, that accent or element, whatever you call it, is going to pop. And I
The
just,
window frames are blue.
yeah.
The house is gonna have windows, and the owners heard loud and clear the concerns regarding the color of it, and that was something that was going to be revisited with them, whether the windows get painted a darker color, or whether they get painted white, they're open to that, and that's something that we can do.
Because that, that elevation does have a lot of, it looks like it has a lot of, no, that's the front.
I thought that issue was resolved.
No, whether, can we see the back, please?
Sure.
I was talking about the back. Yeah, it's, in terms of the statistics, it's resolved, but look at, it's pretty busy and you have blue, that's my concern.
Right, yeah, their concern as well.
Okay, so in any case, okay, so you understand that.
We understand that concern about.
I just don't want to have to keep coming back. I mean, I like the roof, the cedar, design's great. And, so you heard the mayor's view, so. If you eliminate the special exception, I guess that would cause you to,
you do the master plan.
that section was
1,600 square
considered
feet.
small with that. That elevation.
The overall from front to back is 1,600 square feet, the amount of square footage that's actually the special exception is only like 100, 150 square feet or so.
Well,
Maybe
maybe a
more,
lot
I'm
more
just-
than that,
so that's
because
not
it's
good.
the length of the.
It's the short document that's going on.
So that's, I'm glad you brought that up because you just didn't ask for a special exception. I don't think you've made a lot of progress. These would be some people, if you eliminate that 100 square feet, I don't think that solves the problem, is what I'm trying to say. Correct?
No, that won't, at least in my opinion, doesn't solve the problem, but it certainly is a step forward. I thought the blue had been resolved, but I'm wrong. So I would certainly address that. The landscaping is another issue to the extent that the house is going to maintain based on two-story elements.
I missed the blue part. I thought that was resolved too. I mean, it's still there?
Yeah, apparently.
They agreed that it should come back before the board, before the.
Architecture review board.
Yeah, the RPD board.
Okay.
And, but everyone understood there's gonna be windows and the exact color could be determined, whether it was a gunmetal, whether it was a different shade of blue, whether it was white, whether it was mahogany. That was known that would be coming. And that overall didn't affect the massing of the home or anything.
Oh, no, I know that. I just, blue might be a little
Like, again,
noticeable.
attracts the eye to what is already a very noticeable building. So that's another.
That was
thing to
not in
look
the
at.
notice, I don't think.
May I, maybe be out of order, Mr. Boardman, do you have any thoughts about, you're good at solving problems. You got any thoughts of how we move forward? It's our community, it's like, I happen to live in the corporate. You don't need to address my question, but do you have any thoughts you'd like to share, or?
Well, my thought is, it's gotta be a leisurely interactive process between the architects and some part of the town government. And it seems to me that the architectural review board is the place for that to happen. Because it's well within your judgment, send it back to the general comment. Because it also helps center these issues. Because this is not the only time they can deal with. So I sort of send it back, let them deal with the commission believes.
Well, I think we've given them guidance, at least on 3 separate issues.
Yeah, I mean, my third comment is depending on the orientation of houses that, with the special exceptions, there may need to be a little more creativity on the master wing. And whether that's hide it more or dress up that elevation and then landscape it too. I mean, again, I'm not an architect, but I think that's just the way I look at it. They're literally configured.
No, that's a 4th point to look at. Do we need a motion to turn it?
We need a motion to send it to whatever review authority, if that's ARPB, and if you have any guidance, you would include that in the motion.
Okay. Well, on the special exception, we have overall mass, and you've got reviewing the design of the master wing, and you have the landscaping, particularly on the east side.
And just to be complete, and the window frame.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't mean to, but in the window frames. Color.
I think it should be established the color before we go on. I mean, just, before it comes back and says, oh, by the way, I think it should be established now, if it's possible, at the RFP, the color. Not leave it up in the air. I just to tidy things up, just a little.
See, that's fine with me. I think we all in agreement with this. Not to be blown. Okay, what is this? Gunmetal. I'm not quite sure what. Can't step on the architect's toes here, but there's probably a couple options to choose from.
Well, Mandy Jones and her view felt the blue was too strong. She's got a good sense of color because she's an artist. And she thought it should be at minimum much more muted. And I guess by throwing in gray, you can make it more muted. I don't know when it's accurate.
The issue of the color of the windows was discussed, understood by us and by the owners. They are more than willing to, they want to accommodate on that. And we just haven't addressed it yet because we didn't realize that would be today's petition, because we were told we would be going back to the APRB.
What are the rules on window color?
Yeah.
I went to it.
There is none.
Now, the only,
Right.
it says that the window color for
It can't be nearly.
this design has to, the window should be in conformity with the design of
Right.
architectural design, or style, I should say. And I don't know anything about this particular style of house, whether they have colored, I was gonna ask that question.
There are houses that have blue window frames. And that was part of the reason why it was, it was because of the shade of blue.
But is that a traditional, I know they had some unusual architecture up at Windsor, I've been there many times. They reference that as an example of, but is that a typical colonial West Indies, they would put color?
Yes. It's the way I kind of look at it is, it's like someone might go out in a beautiful Armani understated suit, and then they put one little piece of color on something. They compliment it.
Yeah, so one thing, you're not gonna have shutters, and it's all white, it might be white. But so, as you say, Mayor, I think, yeah, I leave it to
I
that.
think we should defer to the architect on that. Something consistent that he recommends.
But you will be determining that before we go back to ARP.
The instruction would be to run back.
The one thing I would say is, they're not supposed to be super dark, so it ends up looking like possibly a modern farmhouse. So I think that goes without saying. I travel. Okay, we ready for a motion?
Yes.
We're gonna make a motion to send the application before us for 5A Banyan Road back to the ARPB for further review with the architect and staff. With the guidance that to review and or remove the special exception that was proposed, to revisit the east elevation in the master wing, revisit the overall square footage and massing of the structure, revisit the landscaping specifically as to the east elevation, possibly slightly the south elevation, and then also to review and come up with a more finite color for the window frames that fits with the architectural style.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Ms. Taylor?
Commissioner Lyons,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Stanley,
Yes.
Commissioner White,
Yes.
Commissioner Orthwine,
Yes.
Mayor Morgan.
Yes. Thank you, gentlemen. Sorry, it was a difficult meeting. Let's move on then to the town manager, utility undergrounding report.
Yeah, this is for, this Friday. Okay, so every month again, I give you an update. So here's where we are. On Wednesday, the Comcast did their second cutover, and it was successful, and it's working. So what they need to do now are between Little Club and Sea Road are the cutovers for the multiple dwelling unit. About 4,001. And that should take them about 2 weeks. While they're doing that, they can begin now wrecking all from Sea Road south to Gulfview, taking up all their existing overhead. In addition to that, actually yesterday, Mr. Beltran met with FPNL. The DOT required a pre-construction meeting. As you know, the next step that FPNL will take is to put in the new streetlights from Gulfview up, to Little Club. And they have to put those in before they take the old ones out. But they met yesterday, and Mr. Beltran was with them. I don't think there was anything significant changes that came about.
No, they had just one that was gonna be bored on the east side of A1A, but it's gonna run parallel to A1A, so there's no special exception for that. They had one that was gonna be crossing at 3649 behind the school. Ends up being that they got a manhole there, that they have a wiring already in place for that, so they don't have to do any boring whatsoever, except for just the one running east and west.
So So we're trying to stay out in front of the DOT so we don't get this. When Comcast is done wrecking, we gotta wait 6 weeks before we can start. So pardon me. I need my audio assistant device here. The FPNL is setting up to start putting in their new poles at the first week or 2 weeks of January. And so that'll take them about 2 weeks. And so the goal here that I'm trying to work out is that Comcast will be done with their cutover here and then in the rest of their wrecking by the time DOT is done. Oh, thank you. Is done putting in the new streetlights. So that way the DOT can then come in and take the old streetlights out and then move on to to taking out the poles without any interruption. So that's where we're at.
I do want to add, Mr.
Yes.
North Ocean, the wrecking that they're gonna be doing on North Ocean from Gulf to, I guess, the Little Club is how you explained it to me. That won't happen until they finish doing the cutovers on the MDUs that are from Sea Road to Little Club. So the stuff that's south of Sea Road to Gulfview, they can't touch it just yet because even though it's connected and it's serving a purpose as of right now, until they get those cutovers done, then you can't wreck that whole entire A1A. So until that gets done, they won't be able to.
But they can do
take it
the
down.
pool.
The rest of the other stuff, my understanding from yesterday with the discussion that I had with them over the phone, they said they were gonna start yesterday, but I hadn't seen the trucks.
Yeah, so we're looking for Xfinity trucks out here. So if you see one, let me know. Yes, Ms. Crack.
You said that they're going to wreck from Sea Road south.
Correct.
When are they gonna wreck from Little Club to Sea Road?
When they complete these cutovers for the MDUs out
Which
here.
is 2 weeks.
In about 2 weeks. Correct.
I'll be back in January.
Good. We always love to see you.
Yeah, we're gonna have to say in January.
Right.
All right, well,
Correct.
thank you for the update.
Okay.
Powered leaf blower.
Yes, okay, so I attempted, as you wanted us to do, to get Mr. Shubin in contact with Mr. Snavely at Place au Soleil, and we did that. And Mr. Roach had said to me that he was going to reach out to Mr. Shubin, and I'm not quite sure that they have done that yet. And I did speak to Mr. Snavely yesterday, and he told me that you sent out basically a survey
Yes.
to your residents.
Sandy sent out a survey to the PAS residents,
Uh,
and we addressed it.
Okay, so, and
What
when
was the reaction at the board meeting?
I think there was one, and Doug, you can help. I think there was one respondent that had an interest in the problem, and nobody else did.
There were 9 responses, and it was split evenly with 1 neutral.
I'm sorry, say that one more, please.
There were 9 responses.
Yes.
And it was split evenly, yes and no, and 1 neutral.
Mr. Snavely did, I thought you said you had like 93?
We have 93 residents.
Okay, all right.
And
That's a big number.
It sounds to me like the people are ambivalent to it at this point. I'm not quite sure how the Corps is going to respond, but.
One resident in Plaza Soleil was quite vocal about how.
Out loud, the gas powered ones are.
But that's, the issue is not for individuals who wish to have their own blower. It's for the landscaping companies that come in and do
Correct.
blowing.
And I think that's the way it was put to.
Right. And I think we've determined that it is feasible. There are municipalities doing it. And it's significantly quieter. I don't know, is there any reservation by anyone on the commission?
Yeah, you know what, I was in Palm Beach at someone's house and the landscapers were there. I can't say it's that much quiet. I mean, you're not gonna go, oh my gosh, I don't hear a leaf blower. It's like, you kind of turn around and what's going on? Because they are loud. They are all loud. I don't care.
I mean,
What
like
anybody
the battery power.
Yeah, well, this is in Palm Beach and they do have battery power because I looked at it after.
Correct.
You know, I have to turn around.
And that's
look.
right.
And you could see it was a battery powered blower. But it's loud. I mean, it's not something you go, oh, that's really quiet. It's still loud too. I don't, you know,
Well, the noise isn't going to go away, right?
no, the noise, that's exactly
In
my
the village
point.
of
The
Southampton,
noise.
they made the change, and it's meaningful. I have to tell you, I like sitting out and reading my newspaper, and when those things are blowing, like on my phone, I have to go inside.
Yeah. But
The
I,
decibels are much too, we're gonna reduce it by 30%.
And there's also,
Is that perfect? No.
Yeah.
there's also,
Really, what they ought to be doing is waking the leaves rather than pushing the leaves on the neighbor's property. But, I'm
that's
not
not
gonna
happening.
do that. So I think it's just it's an incremental improvement, and, that's what you do, it's incremental.
We still have to go inside, trust me.
and the other element to the gas powered ones, the concern is the environment, the two-stroke engines and the smoke. that it produces. So,
Well, we can either push this off another month, awaiting the Plaza Soleil and the Civic Association's input, or we can just make a decision.
Has the civic association made any comment on this?
No,
Well, Mr. Roach, I know, was going to be leading that process, and I don't think two parties have met, so
Okay.
why don't we defer it
I
to
think,
that?
yeah.
We're not gonna implement anything probably before the summer starts, so let it run its course now.
well, I think we had that discussion that we would give this a chance to play out.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll bring it back next month.
All right, let's move it on to another month.
Okay,
This would be like the underground. We'll be talking about this a year from now.
I know.
All right, official grass.
Okay, so we will be educating our public about that, basically through the mayor's state of the state, the state of state address, which the last one we did was state of the town was December 20th of 2020. So maybe next week we
Right, yes, I want to sit down.
we'll get together.
Put something together.
That's right. And because we do have a lot of information to tell people. So, and then through our, we'll continue to do that through our quarterly.
Good.
And then lighting the Monument Street signs. So we've reached out to a couple of electrical people to, I mean, if you remember, we narrowed that down to the intersections of Banyan and Lakeview. And we're really not getting any responses. I think these people have so much work to do that this is such a small job for them. We're not getting any responses. I wanted to ask everybody what you thought about them now that they've been cleaned.
I think they're much better. I mean, in fact, I called you up to tell you what happened.
No,
I could actually see him.
you can actually see, yeah, right. And so I was wondering how they looked at night. I don't see.
I haven't paid attention. But the cleaning worked well.
Okay,
What do you, Bob?
Doesn't do much.
okay, well, we'll continue, we'll figure out a way.
Without light?
Yeah, it's barely visible. I mean, if you didn't know that it was like you wouldn't know it was like you because it's so dim.
Okay.
Yeah. Well,
I think drivers too are used to looking up for street signs. To look at a piece of rock on the road,
No, we don't want to put up street signs.
well, they're already up.
Yeah, some,
Well, I know, but
most
anyone-
streets already have. street
You know, I know.
signs.
Some of the streets still have the signs on with the names.
Yeah, which is helpful.
But it's been an improvement. I mean, just cleaning.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, we'll
All right, that's all. we have.
continue to try to get you a cost.
Let's move on to what's apropos today, architectural massing and its impact on neighborhood character. We just spent the entire meeting talking about this. The town has made certain changes to the code, and to the design manual to try to reduce the visible impact of two-story homes. We have a step back on the top floor, 50% of the first floor. We've required some architectural changes. We've done a few things, but as we saw today, it's been inadequate to address the concern of mansionization particularly in the core, and I suspect it will be in Plaza Soleil as well. So I'd like to put up for discussion the possibility of increasing the front setback for two-story homes. That is from the street. A two-story home has a larger setback. And I asked Trey to look into this and the town manager as well to get a feel for what's our code require now, what might be acceptable, are there other towns doing it? And you can update me on what you found out.
Okay. I mean, I think.
So at this point, we do have a very unique code, and these things are all addressed very differently throughout all the codes that we've looked at. It is going to be something that's going to be very specific to Gulfstream, so it's really picking out maybe what worked in some other jurisdictions and applying it here. But I think that proposal, in meeting with members of the community, there was a comment about a sort of canyon effect that could occur on Polo as you continue to see single-story homes demolished to build two-story homes. And as the mayor's proposing, setting back that front setback a little bit further is going to push that and open it up, and those homes will no longer be so looming over the road. So that is something that we just want to make sure sort of meets with proper change to our code. But really, I think that's a very good idea, and will go a long way in solving that canyon effect. And the question is, do we want to also look at loosening some restrictions perhaps on single-story homes, like we did with Kerry Glickstein's application that came through, where he said, I'm really struggling designing single-story homes on Blue Water Cove for that new addition, where he's really having to design, 10 or 12 Gulfstream homes that are very different and unique, all sort of at the same time, allowing some of that flexibility, he said would help him build single-story homes. So the question is, can we work on reducing the perception of mass from the streetscape on the two-story homes, as well as perhaps encouraging the construction of single-story homes in some way? And that's part of what me and the manager are going to start looking at if the commission agrees. It's very much in keeping with the discussions that we've had for years about what is going to happen over time. And we've seen a number of homes that, single stories that become two stories, and they're maximized, they have special exceptions. So what can we do to reduce that impact that's within the law and doesn't get us into trouble, essentially?
So the question is, do we want to have staff review this and come back with some suggestions? There's another element of concern that I'll raise for you, and it's brought up again today, and that's the change in the finished floor elevation with the flood requirements. They're up, 18 inches?
18 inches.
18 inches. So now you have your stated code roof height, but it's now up 18 more inches. And on a two-story home, that really looms, particularly on Polo. So do we address that with two-story homes?
I mean, and the best example of that, and we've got it going right now on Old School, the house. I mean, that one was impacted by that, and so the finished floor elevation is 18 inches higher than it would have been.
So I have a couple comments.
Sure.
On what we're doing. Let me attack the first one first. Let me attack the last one first. We'll make an observation. The house next to me, also, it's up 2 feet from the street in the front. And in the back, it's up 4 feet, or 3.5 feet. So it's not 18 inches. Okay, it's significant. I don't know what the solution is, but
That would be from the prior lot level.
Yes.
of these lots are
Right, so that's-
some of these lots are 3 or 4 feet
That's
below
right.
where they need to be, and then you got
You know,
But it creates an even more
because
dramatic
The reality is, I'm down about 4 feet. And the good news is, going to the other subject, you know, massing, size, canyon, is we have a one-story house next to us. So while it's up higher, for the one-story, it's certainly better than a two-story. So my perspective on the subject is not just the front. I mean, that's a view that you see as you drive in and out. I spend most of my time not in the car, but in the house. And the fear that I had on the south side of the house was they built a two-story house. And it was going to be very high, eliminate the sun exposure on our house. We lose privacy. And so to me, the practical functional issue on size of homes is how it impacts my enjoyment of my property. And so as we look at this, I think we can't just look at the front. It appears that somebody driving in a car, but how it impacts people living in a home. And I brought this up 5 or 6 years ago. I'll bring it up again. I think we ought to look at square footage. You know, the issue that we, under the last application, it really came down to square footage. You know, it seems like a very large house for the core district. I don't know whether we would feel that way if it was on the oceanfront. Now, admittedly, there you only have the front and the back, but on those oceanfront properties, it's generally so big you don't really see the house except in the ocean. So I think we need to look at it very broadly. And it's not unprecedented. My community, my brother was involved in constructing homes in a high-end similar area like this. They reduced the square footage. In the village of Southampton, which I've always described as not being understated, certainly isn't. The village, and I'm talking about the village homes, which would be equivalent to the core district as opposed to the ocean homes. That's a different zone in the village of Southampton. They downsized. They reduced the square footage because you go down these lovely old streets, single-family homes, they were probably 2,500 square feet. Now they were getting 6,000. And I mean, these buildings were enormous. And so we got this combination of raising the elevation of the first floor because of FEMA. And I don't know, I think maybe we keep sort of talking around the elephant in the room. I think the square footage is part of the problem. It may be the principal problem. So that's my view. So yes, I think we got to look at it, but I'd like to look at it a little more.
To have numbers. It was in our meeting this morning. The applicant was saying, but I am lower than your numbers. So I'm more comfortable with what you're suggesting, which is change the numbers so that there's real guidance to the applicants as opposed to it's got to fit within our district character, which becomes nebulous and discretionary, but still must be enforced, at least at this point. But I agree with you completely. We need to maybe evaluate the FAR for two-story homes.
I think you should encourage the one-story homes, lighten up the rules for the one-story, because you know what, you can almost build out a whole one-story lot and landscape it, which you're talking about the bloom. And so I think it's something maybe urban design can help with, but you know, I don't know if massing 33% is unreasonable or 32%. I think it's because everything's being built up, but I think we should encourage people to build one-story homes and increase the lot, the setbacks or whatever it is, because I think then you'll be happier in general.
I agree that.
I mean, because people are spending a lot of money for these lots now, and I'm not saying, oh, let them have a free for all, but I think you have to encourage them to build beautiful one-story homes, and I think to lighten up, like Trey said, the one-story, and try to put a few more restrictions on the two-story, especially when you build it up 17, 18, whatever. I mean, it does loom down, but eventually, probably all the houses are gonna be down, it's all gonna have to be brought up. It's just
Right.
what's going to have to happen because everyone's gonna be underwater. I mean, literally, the houses that eventually, it's not gonna be a pretty picture.
The reality is that you can build a pretty decent sized house. I have a small lot,
Mhm.
house adjacent to me that's one story.
Yeah, no, you can.
And I don't know, I think it's, I don't know if anybody happens to know. Rebecca, would you know, I think it's gotta be 6,000, right?
It's almost, I think that one's almost 500 here.
But
at
that's
least.
a nice sized
And,
house.
You know, that's a decent sized house.
Yeah.
Which one are you talking about?
The one right next to me.
Oh.
And, you know, so what's interesting about that perspective is adjacent to me, that really works because it's one story.
Yeah.
You know, my lot is a third of the size of the Davis line, the applicant. And, you know, they're going up incrementally, but not twice, you know, 3 times. So, you know, somehow we gotta figure out how, you know, if you got a bigger lot, now we do have in the code, as you might recall, the first 20,000 square feet, I think is at 33%.
Mhm.
Correct.
And then the next is we
20%.
reduced amount of 20%. Maybe we need to look at that. Et cetera. But yes, I think we ought to be.
Well, I think there's a separate problem here, is that this house is a big lot for its location. That's basically what you're saying too. And so somehow you have to figure out that even though they have a big lot, they can still put up a reasonable sized house. If it's in the core.
I agree that we should take it, review the FAR, because it's difficult to rule in a case like this morning. And his argument that he's, you know, under the numbers it makes it really hard to make a decision and almost asking to be cooperative with interpretations of the view of the core and the field. I do think smaller houses and one story, I agree, I love one story homes. And I hate to see Gulf Stream become a double beach.
I also think that special exceptions on new constructions, I'm not sure that we accomplished. Would that help some of this? I mean, it's not gonna help that much massing with this house. but Why do we get special exceptions for new homes?
Well, I think we're gonna see fewer of them. If the comments today are gonna be considered by staff.
So here's one thing I would suggest for the special exception. That there are some criteria that they have to meet, but we never review that. We're gonna, at our pre-app meetings, I would suggest that we require them to answer all of those questions, just like a variance.
No, I think that should be a practice. Absolutely. That's the point of the code.
Right.
It's supposed to meet this criteria.
But a two-story home should have greater difficulty getting a special exception than a single story, right? Yeah, we want to encourage the single story. But, you know, they gotta prove why they need a special.
Right.
We have a code, we have requirements. Well, what is it different about your lot that you get this additional space?
And of course, those answers then do become rather subjective. I mean, it's not really black and white.
No, it's not.
It's.
Which is what Don and Paul were saying. They need some more numerical guidance.
Right.
If they are setbacks, whatever, define it a little better.
With our discussions early in the week with Mr. Boardman, I mean, he suggested that if we're going to do that, we probably need more definitive regulations that are easy to follow and approve.
Adjusting the floor area ratio is an easier way to get smaller homes that are consistent with sort of what's there now. The issue that we have with making homes smaller is the regulation of these lots that will potentially devalue the property, which then subjects us to a uniquely Florida law, the Burt-Harris Act. So if you have a piece of property that you can build an 8,000 square foot house on today, and we pass a modification of the floor area ratio that allows them to build a 6,000 square foot house, there's a very strong argument that we've devalued that property and we would be forced to compensate them for that loss in value. So I just want to say that that's something that has definitely been on our minds at the staff level, and why we haven't really just suggested, let's just make everything in town smaller, because that's just that's a silver bullet. You want less mass, you want everything smaller. And that's why we do have a lot of regulations for the second story house, for 2-story houses. You know, you have your first floor, and then your second floor can only be 50% of the first floor. So we're already making it a lot smaller. You have setbacks on the side, you have setbacks on the front for that wedding cake appearance, so you don't have something that's right up on the front of the street or right up next to your neighbor, so they're looking in your pool. You know, we could certainly look at revising the percentage that can be on the second story, right, to 25%. So now you have a very large first floor, very small second story that's not necessarily going to be looming over the road, that's not going to be to the side. It'll be a lot smaller and understated. And then you'll have a much larger sort of floor plan on the bottom floor. I don't want to throw out too many suggestions, because we can certainly just look into it.
I would counter that. There are a number of people that I know have moved into the core district because of its understated character, and they're happily pay more per square foot because of the character. And make the argument that if you downsize, you reduce the value of property. I mean, that's an easy argument to make, but isn't necessarily correct.
And I think we studied this before in the 2 Ladani properties. Remember, you and I spoke to Ladani, got him to change those 2 homes on A1A, one to a 2-story, one to a single story. And my recollection is the single story sold first and sold for either more or the same amount as the 2-story.
And in fact, the house that's being built next to me is the seaside. And the former owner were gonna pop the top and do a 2-story, but then he realized he hadn't raised first floor, so he said, I'm getting out of this house.
Right.
And I think the seaside has discovered that the 1-story home in the town of Gulfstream is a very appealing product.
Sells back.
I mean, he built that on spec. He didn't have a buyer.
Correct.
And he sold it very quickly for close to $5 million. I hope I can sell my house. But, you know,
So while the Burt-Harris is a legitimate concern, I'm not so sure it is applicable to, well, it's applicable, but would be that's significant.
That's a definition value would be whatever we would think it would be.
I don't think our FAR is bad. We've had it for 25 years or something. We did the design manual. We've studied it several times, maybe making it 30, 33. I don't think it's bad at all. I think your problem here is we're filling up again and having 2-story houses. So I would go back and let people have more leeway with 1-story homes, just because it might solve the problem of the looming lots right now, because of the restrictions with the flooding.
So in that context, I mean, look at a live application with Davis.
Yeah.
If they reduce the amount of square footage on the second floor, because they haven't taken all the property. In fact, he said he had a lot more. He's gonna have to
He
give
was very close. He said, I have a lot left. What was it, 20 square feet? I mean, buildable lot. I mean, that was a little oversight, I thought, on his part, you know.
Which I'm going to question to you. What would you, this is a study, would you like to see that house pushing the square footage more on the first level?
I think it'd go away. That's what I'm saying. In fact, I said, you probably never thought about having just a 1-story house that make you maybe let them have more lot coverage on the first floor. And it's going to prevent the massiveness of what you're thinking as the village effect. Once it's landscaped out, a one-story house is pretty, goes away. I mean, I own that house at 3555 Polo Drive, and I think the house covered, sort of like the new seaside, we covered the whole lot, but you didn't notice it. It just like was a simple one-story house from the outside, and when you walked in, it just, you kept going. But you didn't notice it. Between the hedges and the landscape, it just disappeared. And there was no feeling of, oh my gosh, what did they just build? Like a couple of other houses.
A copy like that.
I just have a question about the architectural review committee. I mean, I think this discussion really goes, I mean, that architect was caught completely flat-footed. They had approved this.
Right.
And if the mayor hadn't said it's too big, and it looks absolutely too big, you know, I just don't know, are you supposed to, is it checks and balances? They approve something and you, I just think maybe the architectural review committee either needs a paid professional architect or somebody to guide them with those guidelines that you read out. They seem not to have heard those or know about those guidelines you read.
Well, hopefully they'll be guided by the comments today. And they're an advisory board, but, so they make recommendations, but, and they, you know, they do the best job that they can. But I think we're advising them to perhaps consider some other elements now in these applications as they come along. And what we're talking about right now is more than perhaps making some significant change, numerical changes to the code that will give much better guidance to applicants and architects and builders, build single-story homes as opposed to two-story, or if they are two-story, having them changed in a manner where they don't loom over the road. Mr. Berman.
I'm just gonna say, I think that if you want to reduce two-story homes, you gotta give them, make it one-story homes, exactly what you were saying. So maybe you can do two things. One is restrict the size of the second story, and two, increase the size on the bottom so that you can get a, let's say, if you got a 7,000 square foot, maybe you can go with 7,500 or 800. Given an incentive that if builder architect, you make this house one story, we're gonna give you a little slack. But if not, we're not, then we got to go with the size that's whatever in there. As, because it's human nature. If you give people a reason to do something, they'll probably do it. Don't give them a reason. Why would you do it? I want the biggest house I can get. It's Gulfstream. I'm paying $2 million for the lot. I need to put up a mansion. So I think the deal is, as you said, Mayor, the numbers. And the second thing is make it palatable, make it efficient, make it smart, that you can build a little bit bigger one-story house if you decide to do that.
Yeah.
That's kind of worth just what you paid for.
Well, I think maybe just deal with the setbacks. I think the FAR should be, I mean, I don't know. I think the setbacks for one story, encourage that with setbacks more. I guess you could do square footage, but more setbacks. Because then you go back to what Trey's saying, if we only allow, 30% for two-story and 33. I mean, I think it should be uniform, but I think the setbacks to encourage people to build a one-story house.
What's the difference?
It's actually cheaper to build a one-story house, I think.
What's the difference with FAR on the first floor of a single story versus first floor of a two-story?
You can get whatever your maximum floor area is. You just have to limit, your second story is limited to half what your first story is. So,
right.
So there's no, that's correct.
Right. So that's not an encouragement to a single story home, right? But you get more space, you can have the same floor level space, and now you add the top portion.
Would it be
So
possible?
you've got to change the FAR.
Yeah, no, but would it be possible to change the setbacks for a one-story house?
Absolutely.
With that, I think that would encourage it. It's cheaper to build a one-story house. They can max it out on one story.
Mean, reduce the setback.
Yeah, for a one-story house, because you're not
And
gonna see it.
increase the setback for the two-story,
Which
which affects the FAR.
No, it doesn't. It won't affect the FAR. You're reducing the setbacks. You're gonna still have the FAR.
because of the, well, that's what I was gonna say, you're putting a lot more, you're taking up a lot more space when you build a single story because all of your square footage is on the bottom floor. So relaxing the setbacks would be beneficial. Yeah, and also you're not dealing with someone looking into your backyard
Right.
because it's only a single story. So I think that would be a good idea and something to look
Well, the
into.
setbacks when you start building these homes were like 12 feet. When they first started building Gulfstream, all these one-story houses.
Sure.
They were like 12 feet. What do we make 15 foot now?
Right.
So I'm saying go back to, I'm not saying 10 or 12, something like that, and give them more leeway next to the hedge, and then they're not gonna be looming over you. I mean, that's an encouragement. I think.
Well, as you, I think the mayor suggested, maybe we engage urban
Yeah,
design
no, I agree with that.
and start listing some practical options.
Mhm.
And I don't know, the problem with the government in the state of Florida, you really can't have a workshop. We can't sit down and have some general discussion. We need to do it in a public forum, right? So, I mean, it'd be great to have some, get some architects and some other people who, Mark Marsh, who I respect, and he understands the core district, get urban design, get some people who really kind of, who's the gentleman who wants the blowers,
Shubin.
and he's in sort of that kind of city planning, and he has a sense of some of these issues. We get some people who can really contribute in a constructive sense to solving the problem. I don't
It's got to
know.
be public too.
Yeah, and absolutely.
But I do think just FAR has been around for 25 years, and I still think this is a really desirable community. It really has been. So I just think you should encourage, just because how much people are having to build up now and the effect on the neighbors too. It makes a huge statement. And that's not going away.
Well, Trey, what do you recommend as the next step? Should it be to engage a professional like urban design to begin an evaluation? Do you feel capable enough of reviewing our code and making some suggestions? We bring them back at the next meeting?
Well, urban design, I mean, they're planners, not
Right.
necessarily architects.
I certainly think the staff is capable.
Right.
It is just a longstanding problem and something that I think Mr. Boardman said is something that's kind of coming to a head. I think we've been saying that for years, that every time there's a turnover with a house, we saw it at the Cat Lady's house, we saw it at the one just south of 201 Lakeview or north of 201 Lakeview, that's getting a new house. You're getting bigger houses and we're seeing a lot of that. So I think that it's really the time to sort of draw a line and let's maybe engage a professional, send something out for an RFP to do some sort of comprehensive code review. But Greg and I can certainly look into that and report back next month and what we find, because I think that it would be beneficial to really get a professional engaged and look at our code, and we can work with them, educate them on what exactly Gulfstream is all about, what we're trying to do, have the legal side of it, and making sure that we're not crossing any lines and doing something comprehensive. Now, again, I don't know what that would cost or what that would look like, but we can certainly do some research and report back.
All right.
If
you evaluate the code, identify the areas where there's potential for change, and then come back next month with that, identifying those sections and a recommendation of whom we might reach out to as well.
I remember we had a meeting here, I don't remember exactly what the subject was. But we invited several architects here. I think it was the height of the second floor ceiling. Do you remember
I
that?
do, I remember them all, most uniform.
Oh, I know. That's
Higher,
right.
higher roof
That's right.
lines.
So that's what we have to kind of look out for with the architects.
I'm not really not in favor of bringing an architect based on that experience.
Well, we can certainly touch base with
Certainly
urban
not one
design.
that practices in this area.
Correct.
Didn't we bring down the height of the roof on two-story homes at one time?
Still at 35, right?
It was.
It's 35.
It's 35, okay.
Yes. Yeah, so, okay, well,
Everybody wants 10-foot ceilings or.
right.
That was the problem. They all wanted high ceilings, not only on the first floor, but on the second floor.
So,
Then we had the two-story entry feature.
I know.
That was it.
Two-story entry
That's
feature.
right.
Yeah.
Nationalization.
Been fighting this for a while.
And we have, again, changed and gone back to the opportunity to build larger entry features on first floor homes. I mean, on one-story homes, and one of those is next to you.
I have to say, I compliment the mayor for really kind of focusing on this issue, because there's been a lot of chatter over the last 10 years about every time a house, two-story house is built, they max out, and it's, how do they allow the house of that size? And there's a bunch of them poll. The good news is there were a good number of houses that were built on a one-story, which are wonderful, so that they all haven't shifted, but a bunch have. And I think that, we've been sort of talking around it. Let's just hit it hard and figure out what the solution is.
Well, the timing is now, because, north of Mr. Gordon's house, they're all one-story out on his side of Polo. And some of those are probably going to be story houses. So.
Okay, well, so that's how we'll proceed.
On two-story houses too, it's hard when you have so much cement in front of the house too. I think that's, what I'm talking about, Polo Drive. You have a box and then you have cement courtyard. I mean, it just, I'm not bringing it up, but it makes it look like massive.
Okay, let's move on to Florida opioid fund.
Okay, I'm going to let Trey cover this. This is as a result of a lawsuit between towns and cities and pharmaceuticals, and the settlement from that lawsuit.
So there's a $21 billion multi-state agreement with 3 of the nation's largest pharmaceutical companies to settle litigation related to the opioid crisis in America. Also involved is Johnson & Johnson. They're paying an extra $5 billion over 9 years. Florida is receiving almost $300 million from that agreement. A brief overview of the settlement agreement. It's been established to distribute settlement proceeds related to the recent wave of opioid litigation in Florida. Required action for municipalities to participate depends on whether you have a population over or under 10,000. So with Gulfstream, we need to sign a participation agreement, which indicates a releasing of all future claims against the pharmaceutical companies for their involvement in that opioid crisis. So we're just looking for a consensus that we want to go ahead and authorize the town manager to sign those participation agreements. It's essentially a no-brainer. We're waiving our right to sue the drug companies, which we weren't going to be involved in anyway. However, the distribution of funds is restricted. At this point, it would be mostly specific to Gulfstream, would go to educating law enforcement or other first responders regarding appropriate practices and precautions when dealing with fentanyl and other drugs. And there's a lengthy document that I'm reviewing with the town manager to see what we could spend those funds on. It is not a large amount. It's $1,500 a year, and that would be available for the next 18 years. So we'd essentially have something sort of available for our law enforcement to train specific to these drugs, just as long as we sign this agreement. So I just wanted to see if that was something we would be interested in. The chief and captain mentioned that, as long as we can find something to, a nice training program for.
That's eligible.
that's eligible, that they would certainly use it. I mean, it's free money for training.
I think the town manager has a recommendation for its use.
Yes, and I spoke with the chief captain of the drug, I guess, called Narcan. Most police departments, all fire departments carry that around. When they come up on an overdose, I mean, they used to inject it, now it's a spray, nasal spray. We don't carry that, and once it's used, I mean, these people just pop right back up. And so, I mean, that's something that we would explore. Obviously, there'd be some education involved in it for the use of it, but we don't do that right now. So that would be.
Our policemen don't have Narcan in their cars. And you've had experience with overdoses before. So.
So $800 a shot plus training, right? At least that's the current value. I think.
Well,
No, you're not.
The city of Delray.
Yeah, right.
You talk to the guys and gals in the city of Delray, they're using that like sometimes 3 times a day
Oh, I
on
know.
the same patient.
Yes, that's correct. So we haven't reached that level yet, but
Well, whatever,
That is an issue,
that's
yeah.
to be considered.
Right.
But the decision to be made is whether we accept this.
Right.
Sign off on. Let's make a motion to approve it.
I make a motion to approve.
Authorize the town manager to execute these participation agreements.
A second.
Ms. Taylor?
Commissioner Lyons,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Stanley,
Yes.
Commissioner White,
Yes.
Commissioner Ortele,
Yeah.
Mayor Morgan.
Yes. ARPB meeting will be December 16th at 8:30 a.m. It's Thursday. Finance director report.
yes, everything appears normal in it. Just to point out, as Ms. Tu noted, our fiscal year 2021 revenue collection is closed. The remainder of those revenues would be allocated to our current year. Some of our contracts have already been paid in full. You might notice that if you're looking through the spreadsheets. And our first ad valorem revenue collection for the year 2022 was received in November.
Any questions? If not, Chief, please report.
Request company for be accepted as permitted. I don't know if you're aware of one of the new officers that we hired has resigned already. However, we do have another officer we're doing a background on currently. If all goes well, we expect to put him in place first week of January.
Very good. Any questions? Not, we'll accept it as submitted. Let's move on to the civil engineering consultants with their question or selection.
Okay, yes, sir, and I'll hand this over to Trey. I was not part of the selection committee, and we had Ms. Tu, Beltran, and Trey, so I'll let him give you the report.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. So we met on November 19th to, as a selection committee, to review the 4 applications that we got, that we received. Fairly impressed with them. The procurement document laid out the 6 criteria and corresponding weights concerning how the proposals would be evaluated. And there was a pretty clear consensus among the selection committee to recommend Baxter and Woodman. Their experience, past performances, including relevant project experience and ability of personnel and its workload and scheduling were just far above and beyond what we saw from the other firms. I was very happy to see that our current engineer was one of the ones that we would so highly recommend. So our recommendation is to approve. Our recommendation would be to start negotiations with them for a contract to do this work on the next phase of the CIP.
And we would bring that back to you next month, right?
Correct.
Okay. Is there a motion as presented?
I'll move as presented. Okay.
I'll second it.
Ms. Taylor?
Commissioner Lyons,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Stanley,
Yes.
Commissioner White,
Yes.
Commissioner Ortele,
Yes.
Mayor Morgan.
Yes. Let's move on to resolution number 21. All right.
Mr. Mayor, just before we start the next item, I'm going to recuse myself from voting on resolution 21-14. Because this is the applicant of the mundane task of how to abandon a private utility.
Very good, thank you. You are recused. Ms. Taylor.
This is a resolution of the Town Commission, of the Town of Gulfstream, Palm Beach County, Florida, vacating and abandoning the general utility easement within the northern 12 feet of lot 93, as it was originally platted in the plat of Place au Soleil, as recorded in Plat Book 27, page 69, Public Records of Palm Beach County, Florida, and as more particularly described herein, and for other purposes. This is presented for approval at this meeting today.
Can I ask a question? What was the purpose of that easement and why are we giving it up?
So the original, it was a platted easement as part of the plat when the lots were created in Place au Soleil. This was the northern boundary of the plat, the northern plat limit. The owner of that house subsequently, or that lot rather, subsequently purchased a small parcel directly north of it, which was, I don't know if you're familiar with that, the 2900 property that we have the easement on, all that stuff. So a small portion of that driveway combined the lots, and now the northern, the easement that was on the northern side of the lot now sort of bisects what is the existing lot now. So because of that, and if you look at the survey, you can see very clearly on the third page, it runs directly through the middle of the property. So we're just abandoning it. There's nothing in it. We made sure the applicant reached out to the utility providers. We don't have any town infrastructure in there, and it really serves no purpose. So we have no problem abandoning it.
We don't use it, have no plans.
That's correct, yes.
Thank you. Okay. Any other questions? Not, is there a motion to approve resolution?
I make the motion to approve resolution 21-14 is read.
Ms. Taylor?
Commissioner Lyons.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Smith. No. He can't. Commissioner White.
Yes.
Commissioner Orthwyne.
Yes.
Mayor Morgan.
Yes. Anything from the commission? If not, thank you all. Yes, sir.
I would just like to thank our ladies here for decorating Town Hall. They seem to have a lot more interest in it than the guys. I mean, we helped out with lifting things, but they're much more creative than we are. I would also like to announce that our deputy clerk, Renee Basil, will be spending the next year as the vice president of the Palm Beach County Municipal Clerks Association.
Good for you. Good. All right. Glad you got involved. Sure.
They pay you?
They pay her as much as we pay you guys.
All right, thank you all for coming. Merry Christmas.